Thank you very much, Adam. Thank you guys for coming along today, and a big thanks to the guys at Sea Turtle Foundation as well for getting me up here. It's amazing for me to be able to get to see some parts of this amazing country with this message. As you guys may be aware, I just returned quite recently from this expedition, and to be able to kind of go around and start talking to people about it is amazing. Am I going to do record? No. Okay. So just to kind of put it all in a bit of perspective for you, like I'm not a scientific researcher as such on this issue of marine debris. I really just come from a concerned citizen who's been able to kind of ride a pretty incredible wave to the point where I can travel around the country and talk about it. I just started out as a surfer who hated seeing plastic in the surf around me, and I started to learn more about it as I studied environmental science at uni and the impacts of marine debris. And I was like, well, when I got old enough and wise enough, I went on a path to do something about it. So this is a little bit of a presentation about that evolution and a little bit of, obviously, about the gyre experience. And I'm quite happy for you guys to jump in with questions at any stage, and we'll do a fair comprehensive Q&A as well at the end where you guys can get around to seeing it. And do come along to see one of those film nights if you can, because the film, it's a really easily digestible package about the greater issue around plastics, not just the impact on the oceans, but the impact it's having on our own lives in terms of the human health, and also a little bit about the overriding pressure of industry and corporations to kind of suppress us and make us think that we can just keep on using all this plastic that we do use. And it's very clear that we are using too much of it. When I'm out there on a boat 2,000 kilometres from the nearest landmass in some of the most remote oceans on Earth, I'm looking over and seeing plastic, then that's a pretty good indication that something's bloody wrong. So anyway, I won't go into too much of a rant. We'll go into this. So a little bit of background, I guess. Why have we got so much plastic in our oceans? Well, you can see here we have an image from the developed world, the Los Angeles River in California, after a heavy rain event. A colleague of mine took that photograph, and it goes to show what can happen after a rain event when you're in highly urbanised areas. Quite horrific. And if we go to other end of the spectrum and look at the impact in some parts of the developing world, which for me actually was one of the key turning points when I travelled to Indonesia and India in 2007, 2008, and I suddenly saw the impact from the developing world, and it was like my world has got a whole lot bigger. I thought we could, at least try and encourage people to look after their waste in an educated, developed country like Australia, but when you see what's happening in other parts of the world, you realise it's absolutely monumental, the task at hand. Yeah. And this is an image I took of a beach in a very remote part of Hawaii. You may have heard about this particular beach, Camilo Beach. It's kind of touted as the world's dirtiest beach and plastics beach. It gets thrown around with sometimes as well. But the horrific thing about this is that 99.9% of the plastic you see in an image like that, and you see on these beaches, it hasn't come from Hawaii. And I mean, when you look either direction away from Hawaii, it's a long way before you get to another landmass. So this stuff is all coming from the North Pacific Gyre or the garbage patch. It's frightening because, as Adam was saying, I'm shooting a documentary. Well, you didn't actually mention I'm shooting a documentary at the moment around this issue, and so I arrived at this beach and I was, in cinematic bliss, filming all this plastic around me, going, "Oh my God, this is incredible!" And then it hit me, and I was heartbroken when I realised the true extent of this issue. Now, I don't know if you guys have seen this range of photographs before by a well-known artist come environmental activist, Chris Jordan. He's a Seattle-based artist. And in 2009, in September, he travelled to Midway Atoll, which is the remote island chain to the northwest of Hawaii, between Hawaii and Japan, northwest Hawaiian island chains. Once again, some of the most remote islands on Earth. And this is the Laysan albatross, which their population is becoming decimated by plastic pollution. The adults actually forage the waters of the North Pacific Gyre, collecting food for their young. So this is a chick, one of thousands that die every year as a result of being fed plastic. And I remember when I saw this image in 2009, and I was just looking into it, and there's a whole range of photographs. It's probably got about 30 or 40 images, and they're pretty powerful. But just seeing things that could have touched my hands and realising that this is really wrong. This shouldn't be ending up. Our consumer items should not be ending up in the stomachs of innocent creatures. That was a real turning point for me. I do urge you to go and look at some of his work. Now, just to kind of keep that whole horrific thing going, we do know that the the impacts of marine debris on organisms are profound. The two major causes being ingestion, so we're talking about just before with the albatross. There's another image up there on the top left of another carcass. So ingestion, either selectively eating the plastic, thinking it's food, or being fed it inadvertently by the adults. And also the issue of entanglement. There's a very good example there with the turtle and an old six-pack ring can, which I know we don't use down in New South Wales anymore. I don't know if you guys have them up here at all still. Still widely used over in the States. I was over in the States recently and they're using those a lot for 6-pack and 4-packs of beer cans. And some other entanglement issues there as well, fishing line, horrific image. So I apologise for the confronting ones, but they're the ones that speak most loudly to the greater population. So very important that we get these sort of photographs and vision circulated widely so people kind of stand up and realise that things don't just go away once they're in the ocean. They stick around and they cause a great deal of harm. Just to give you an example of an Australian context, and I'm sure there's a lot of locally based stories here as well, but Australian Seabird Rescue based their head office is down in Ballina in northern New South Wales. And in June this year they discovered one of many sea turtles that washes up, a juvenile green sea turtle. This particular one was found to have 317 pieces of plastic in its stomach, a lot of those being the soft plastic. So we can make a real link there between the things like plastic bag, plastic sheeting, plastic packaging, and the turtles kind of selectively eating those, mistaking them for a food source. And obviously up here at the moment, incredible pressures on the sea turtle population with the issues after the cyclone season, which is horrific. So we don't need plastic to go in there. I mean, we can argue that aside from the fact we've probably already decimated huge seagrass populations, but a cyclone is one reason to be a pressure. But when you think about plastic, I mean, things that people didn't even remember utilising or disposing of, why should they be the cause of death for these creatures? It's horrific. I got a really good piece of debris actually over from Hawaii, which illustrates the problems associated with plastic bag, and I really appreciate Adam's talk there about plastic bag bans, because for me it's quite clear that we can talk till we're blue in the face that people should reuse their bags and they should do this and they should do that, they should bring their green bags. It's not working because they're still ending up in the ocean. So legislation and bag bans is a very, very good move, and I do support people to do that. So this plastic bag, which came from the North Pacific Gyre, it wouldn't be here in this shape were it not for the fact it was tied into a knot. And if it's one thing that we actually encourage as people working this issue, that when people do finish using a plastic bag, if they are going to use them, tie it in a knot, because it's less likely to go and travel on the breeze and get out and escape into the ocean. But the knot has held this one together, but everything else is just so brittle. So items which end up in the oceans, they don't actually retain their structure for very long at all. And I've got a whole selection of examples here where you'll see that. So yeah, this is just the remnants of a plastic bag. So all those bits of film that end up in these sea turtles would have just been shards of this plastic bag, which eventually come apart. But I mean, you can imagine what that would look like floating in the ocean. I'm surprised it even made it into my hands and wasn't already consumed by a larger species that looks exactly like a jellyfish in my eyes. And the other one that's quite horrific in an Australian context is the population of flesh-footed shearwaters over on Lord Howe Island. I've only recently discovered this information. It hasn't been widely distributed too much yet, but some researchers from the University of Tasmania and the Lord Howe Island Museum are doing a lot of research into the impact of plastic ingestion in this particular bird species, which feed in the Tasman Sea. So they're nesting on Lord Howe and doing the same thing, foraging in those oceanic areas around Lord Howe Island for foods for their young. So they're fishing in oceanic waters which are containing debris from Australia. There's no denying it. The stuff that these guys are being fed is coming from Australia. So, and they feel that it may be the worst affected species in the entire world in terms of seabirds from plastic ingestion. This example you see here in the photograph is an 80-day-year-old chick, so it's still very, very young, and it had 276 pieces of plastic representing 15% of its body mass. So that's like me having 12 kilograms of plastic inside me. So it's really quite horrific, and their populations are in severe decline. So this is an Australian issue, it's a global issue. Okay, so it's not just about this infamous Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Now, Adam gave quite a bit of an introduction about where I kind of come into this. I just wanted to make a difference in any way that I could. So in 2009, we formed this organisation, and it was all about creating a positive movement of getting people to go out there and, you know, take that huge leap of saying, I didn't put that bit of plastic trash there on the beach or an extra waterway, but it doesn't matter, I'll pick it up. So that was our message from the start. And it may seem insignificant that we can't solve this problem by just getting people to go and pick up 3 pieces of trash, but we can most definitely get people involved in a movement to understand the greater implications of plastic once it gets into the ocean. So it's all about getting people to make that gesture, but to understand, because people still don't know about it. I'm constantly giving, talking to people. I mean, most people who come along to my talks and lectures already know about it, but people in the street, people on aeroplanes that I'm transporting around, they haven't even heard of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. They have no idea. So it's clearly going to do much, much more in getting this message out there. So that's what the idea was behind Take 3. But it's interesting to think about it when I do talk about real action and real results. If every Australian took 3 pieces of trash, then we'd end up with 66 million less pieces of trash in the environment. So you can make a difference. You just got to try and mobilise the masses, which is the hard part. So we do lots of things associated with youth programs, community programs, just trying to get this message out there. We do want to make it a very strong emphasis on youth. I think that's the key. If we can kind of get these people engaged in this issue sooner rather than later, then we're going to have a good bunch of future leaders to come on board. But that wasn't enough for me. Once we found out earlier this year in April that we were going to get this $50,000 grant from Taronga Zoo to take our message to the world, basically, it was like, wow, I knew we had a good idea, but I had no idea it was actually going to, give us $50,000. So I was scouring the internet one night, and I saw this opportunity to go and join up on a scientific research expedition to the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. So immediately my life just changed, and I was like, okay, sweet, that's what I'm going to do. There was no two ways about it. It was going to cost me $10,000 to do it. I didn't care. Didn't care about my job. Didn't care about anything. I was going on this voyage. So I sent off an application, and they were ecstatic to have me involved. So, and the idea was to film for this documentary project. So it involved sailing 5,000 kilometres, something that I'm not a sailor by nature. I love the ocean, but I'm used to kind of surfing amongst it, not floating around in it for 3 weeks. So it was quite unique, and it was amazing. So I'm going to show you guys just about 3 minutes of footage that I kind of gathered, just quickly thrown together to give you guys some sort of idea about what it's like. This is a bit of a chronology of what happened out there. Now, it wouldn't work on the thing before, so I'm just going to quickly bring it up on this screen here. We'll readdress some of the things that you see when we're done.
I left my country when I was 1925, and drifted to a town on the Cuban coast, met a woman who became my life. And oh, when I saw her, darkness fled from me. It flew like a blackbird into the sun on the day she married me. Dear God, dear God, I remember climbing up those shoulders and coming up under you like a lion, and coming down like we were dying. Dear God,
felt a lot longer than that when I did it. It felt a hell of a lot longer, but it was amazing. It really was. So I'll go through some of the things that we kind of saw in that, so you kind of get a bit more understanding about what was kind of going on in that series there. So we talked a little bit before about the impact on the beaches of Hawaii. There's another image there of Camilo Beach. Very interesting to see here the amount of organic debris as well. This beach actually throughout Polynesian and Hawaiian law was the place you'd go to find the best log for your outrigger canoe. So it's naturally a focal point for the oceanic debris to come here. So it is an extraordinary beach in that context, but it was horrific to see the stuff that was there. And it wasn't the macro debris that shocked me, it was this stuff. It's the plastic sand. Now, I do have, so you probably saw in there the scenes where people are scooping it out. That's literally what you could do. You could just collect absolute container loads of the stuff, of this plastic sand. And it was once upon a time larger items. So this is the problem with the issue in the oceans, is that large items don't retain their structure for very long. It's the photodegradation from the sun, it's the physical disturbance of the ocean, and it's the breaking of those kind of polymer chains which result in it being these fragments. But remember, it's not biodegrading, it's only breaking up. So even when this stuff is a microscopic piece, it's still plastic, it's still there, and it's still not going to go away. So this is the truly frightening nature of it. I've also got a sample there of one of the gyre samples. And that's what it was like, just everywhere between rocks above the high tide mark. Yes?
Multiply that by 2 for all the plastics that don't float.
That's true, exactly. So as you guys may be aware, not all plastic floats, especially the stuff, even what we use in beverage containers, PET, it doesn't float, it actually sinks down to the surface. So if you guys are divers or you've done some examinations of near-shore environments, you'll find incredible amounts of debris underneath the ocean. I'm surprised that the plastic industry hasn't done more to actually adopt that stuff widely, so that they don't get labelled as being that bit of floating plastic. You know, they're going to start adopting maybe the stuff that sinks, so it gets out of sight, but it doesn't go away. So this one I think will work. So when we're talking about the oceanic gyres, there's 5 major oceanic gyres and lots more smaller ones. And this little graphic here from a researcher, Nikolai Maximenko at the University of Hawaii, Manoa campus. He actually is with the International Pacific Research Centre, IPRC. So he developed this one to kind of give us a bit of a snapshot of what would happen over 1 year, 10 years, even up to 1,000 years, if we were to release, I think he based it on 200,000 drifter buoys at set locations around these major oceans. And we'll see here from this graphic what he feels like what would happen. So eventually we're going to start to see areas kind of going a darker shade of green, brown, then red. And that's where we can kind of understand in our gyres how they're working, how they're bringing those items together. So moving up to past 5 years now. So you can see a definite North and South Pacific one and North and South Atlantic, and a lesser one here in the Indian Ocean. So that's at 10 years. And then he kind of hypothesizes that if we did it for 1,000 years, he actually feels that most of those drifter buoys would actually end up in the South Pacific. So the North Pacific gyre and the garbage patch has been the one that's been the most attention brought to it, but it is part of a much greater global problem. The team at the 5 Gyres Institute, in conjunction with Nikolai Maximenko, have now successfully gone and undertaken scientific research expeditions to all 5 gyres, and they've got a great organisation called 5 Gyres, funnily enough. And I was out there with a team of those guys, Dr. Marcus Eriksson, who co-founded that. So he's gone out there now and got evidence to show that there's high density concentrations of plastic in each of the gyres, but very, very hard to study. The one thing I found out being out there was it's so variable. I mean, we had planned to trace a path. Actually, I'll show you in the next slide. We had proposed to study this particular area there. If you saw in the previous slide, the North Pacific garbage patch is actually made up of 2 garbage patches. There's a western one and an eastern one. So the eastern one closer to Japan, and the western one is kind of like this dog bone current in between the 2 of them, a transferal zone. So we wanted to go and study the western garbage patch in that area there. So basically taking a diagonal line between Hawaii and Vancouver. Our actual path, due to the weather, was very different here. So we're looking at the yellow and red dots as being reference points for our 2011 study. So you can see there we were actually forced to go
due north and almost skirt around the edge of where we wanted to go. And that was based on the weather at the time. So the North Pacific, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, the central accumulation zone, generally sometimes, most of the time, it aligns with this huge high pressure cell, which sits over the North Pacific region. So you can kind of hope to get there and sit in that nice little quiet dead zone in the middle of the high pressure cell and undertake your studies, see how the garbage patch is behaving. Well, it was sitting a lot higher northwest when we were there, so we kind of had to go and chase that in order to do the research. To do the research utilising the manta trawl, which is the big broad trawl that we showed in there, you need to have relatively calm sea surface state. You can only be travelling at 2 nautical miles an hour, so 2 knots. So we needed those calm conditions, and physically you can't even see most of the debris when you're looking outside the boat because the ocean's moving around, it's very turbulent, and as you were saying before, not all of it floats on the surface, it's right throughout the water column. So very, very hard to study, very variable, but we do know it's out there in huge concentrations. If you want to know a little bit more about the actual study objectives, so I wasn't a part of structuring these objectives. These are all set by the Algalita Marine Research Foundation, the 5 Gyres Institute, and also 5 universities around the world, including University of Hawaii, University of Örebro in Sweden. There was one in Arizona, and a couple of other ones as well there. So trying to get an idea of sampling the sea surface using this manta trawl to try and understand the temporal and the spatial distribution of this debris. So trying to just create a better map so when we do go there and talk to people about it, we can actually say this is how it is, this is how it's behaving. Second one was investigating the fouling communities of marine organisms on plastic marine debris. So we saw a little bit of a glimpse in that one underwater shot of the rope and net bolus that was floating in the ocean. You saw the amount of life that was attracted to living on that. These artificial ecosystems that are forming out there. But it's the fouling as well of the debris items, which is a bit of a major concern because throughout eternity, if we had organisms being transported across oceans, it was either floating on organic debris like your coconuts and seed pods and logs, or by flight via birds. So now we've got billions and billions and billions of plastic pieces out there which aren't going away. So that means that there's that opportunity for a much greater transport, just like we had the same concerns about exotic organisms being transported in ships ballast. Then in the same way, we've got to be concerned about what's going to happen to global biodiversity for certain species travelling on this debris around the world. And we also had to take and freeze samples to check what was being colonised on them. Also doing some stuff for the United Nations Environment Programme, looking into the accumulation of persistent organic pollutants, which is one of the more frightening areas of concern, and we'll look at it a little bit later on in the presentation about this issue, is that hydrocarbons, toxins that we use on land that get into the oceans, hydrophobic, so that when you've got these little bits of plastic coming along and floating along, they actually soak up and absorb those hydrocarbons in very high quantities. And then we've got fish eating it, we've got zooplankton eating it, we've got all sorts of animals throughout the food chain eating it. What's it going to mean for us with the kind of bioaccumulation of these toxins throughout the food chain? So UNEP is quite interested in that, so we're doing some sampling for them, getting fish tissue, kidneys, seawater samples, so they go back and test to try and map out what kind of hydrocarbons are in the middle of the ocean and in the organisms that live out there. Got some more images there from the experience. There was one day of fun. I got really seasick. I didn't tell you that before, but I got really seasick on the boat. And the one thing that kind of saved me and made me feel amazing was getting to swim in the middle of the ocean. So that was pretty spectacular. Diving off the side of a boat and knowing there was 5,000 metres of nothing below you. It's quite extraordinary, but loved it. That's our crew down there as well. So you can see there, once again, the accumulation of biota on these debris items. It was just immense, these gooseneck barnacles. And within that, you had so much invertebrate life. It was unbelievable. So much incredible stuff. That's the manta trawl, which skims the ocean surface. Like I said before, 2 nautical miles an hour. We deploy that one just for an hour at a time, bring it in, record the whole range of parameters, like the lat long and temperature, salinity, and all of the above. So sea surface state. And that's how we accumulate it down the end there. So we've got this kind of like little 333 micron little mesh bag at the end, which kind of gives us the results of what's in there. And as I said before, there's one here you can kind of check out. And this is the kind of stuff that we found. This is actually in the high-speed trawl. So this was out there in the water for longer than the manta trawl, but it gives you some sort of idea of what you find there. You've got lots of organic matter with these kind of Velella and various different things there, but you do see a lot of the plastics. And we've got 2 pen caps there, up near that blue piece, a toothbrush. And you guys spot this toy plastic gorilla down in the bottom right, who became our mascot. And also got the pre-production nurdles. So these things here are the plastic pellets that they use in the manufacture of plastic items. So that's how they transport it around the world. And there's so much wrong with the system because nurdles are showing up everywhere. So there's a major problem either with the transport or how they're being held at manufacturing facilities, but it's really bad. And if you guys ever feel like going out and being citizen scientists, or if you do any of these studies at school, you may learn that there's a guy over in Japan, a researcher, who's actually asking for people, citizen scientists, to go out to their beach, find nurdles, put them in a sterile container using tweezers, and send them off to him, and he will actually analyse them and tell you what hydrocarbons, what toxins are on your beach. So it's called Pellet Watch, pelletwatch.org, if you ever want to go and do that kind of stuff there. And it's quite horrific. And they look like fish eggs, so you can imagine how many of those are getting eaten. Some more photographs, a close-up there of our little mascot next to a Columbus crab, and some other samples there of what we kind of find after we filter out the trawl samples. And we made the gorilla work too, no freeloaders, so we got him on the ropes, saved me a few calluses. This is some images that were captured in the Algalita Marine Research Foundation laboratories in Ventura Beach in California. So when you look under a microscope at these samples, once you've kind of filtered it out, you find out that you can start to see evidence of those microplastic particles, and they've got evidence to show even the zooplankton ingesting those microplastic particles. So you can actually see that it's all levels of the food chain that are consuming the plastic, mistaking it for food. So it's really quite horrific when you think about just how much of it must be out there. And if it does has this impact with bioaccumulation, what it's really going to mean, because we rely on the ocean for so much of our, 80% of the world's protein, I think, is something like that comes from the ocean. So pretty severe. It's found evidence of debris with coral growing on it, showing us the length of time it's been out there. Huge amounts of bottles that have actively been eaten by fish, which is quite frightening as well. And the other thing which really impacted me, I suppose, was because we don't get a lot of, where I'm from, we don't really get ghost nets and drift nets washing up and whatnot. So to go over there and see the amount of that stuff, but also realising that it was all plastic. There's no ropes are made out of natural fibres anymore unless you live in Africa or India in some small community. It's all made of plastic. So even the rope that's coming apart is ending up as microplastic pieces. I don't know if anyone saw a really recent story, actually. It was in the Sydney Morning Herald about 3 days ago. It had been alluded to a little bit earlier, but yeah, it's almost a story which makes me want to give up. But when we go and wash our synthetic clothes in our washing machine and it goes off to the sewage works and eventually gets treated out to the ocean, fibres from our clothing are plastic, and they're going out there and they're showing that a single garment being washed could lead to 1,000 pieces of microplastic getting into the ocean. So it's almost like, oh God, I don't want to even hear that. It's hard enough trying to deal with the macroplastic issue, let alone that one. And also the growing amount of cleaning products which are using plastic in them as an abrasive. Even shower gels and stuff, they've got these beautiful little flecky things. You think, oh, that'll get me a bit cleaner. It's little shards of plastic that are going straight into the oceans. I mean, it's really madness. No one is thinking about this issue. No one is thinking about the long-term implications of this obsession of plastic that it's having. So yeah, it's quite frightening how many avenues there are to getting plastic into the oceans. Another image here from Algalita, which is showing just a 25 centimetre fish that had 17 pieces of plastic inside it. So we do know that fish are actively selecting plastic, mistaking it for food. It's just a matter of proving. And we do know from the guys over at UNEP have shown in a laboratory the transfer of certain toxins to fish tissue via contaminated plastic. But we just don't have a great deal of solid evidence out there showing it in the oceanic environment, but it probably won't be too far away. There's a lot of guys working on that. And a more extreme example, this is a mactophid, so a lanternfish, very small, 9 centimetres, big as your finger, and it had 84 pieces of plastic in its stomach. And you can see there a comparison between what was deemed to be organic from the stomach contents and what was plastic, and it's a very severe one. And that's probably because it couldn't pass the plastic just stays there and ends up taking up all that critical space. And the Scripps Institute over in California did a study that they published in about June this year as well, might have been July. 9.2% of the McTophids they caught in a sample area near the Pacific garbage patch had evidence of plastic ingestion. So, yeah, it's quite horrific. This may end up repeating a little bit of what I've kind of said already, but this is the director of the research at Algaloo Marine Research Foundation, Marcus Erickson, just giving his kind of account of what it means to be having these toxins entering the
I think the implications are profound and they're global. The plastic, unlike other materials like paper, metals, or glass is inert in the environment. It becomes sand again. You've all beach glass walking your own coast. Wood will biodegrade. Wood and paper biodegrades and goes away. Metal will oxidize. But plastic does none of the above. What plastic does in the environment, as it floats around, it's absorbing many persistent organic pollutants, what we call the POPs, the POPs. These are things like pesticides that wash up our farms out to sea, oil drops from cars, and other hydrocarbons that are leaving our land, going out to sea, where they persist. They don't mix with water. But along comes plastic, which is a similar kind of material. These POPs will stick to that plastic. And we have found in very, very high concentrations, these plastics can absorb pollutants. So now it's not just this material that's so durable, non-biodegradable, that floats in the ocean. It's now this toxic little pill. And we're finding that many marine organisms, many kinds of fish are selecting it. Seabirds are selecting it to eat. And filter feeders, like baleen whales and jellyfish and barnacles and salps, are just blindly gulping seawater and absorbing a lot of this plastic. The current question now we're trying to answer is, do those toxins migrate from the plastic when ingested into the organism's tissues and organs? And if that's true, there's potentially a human health issue of these POPs, these pollutants, that we create on land, washing out to sea, and coming back to us on our dinner plate with the fish that we harvest. And it's not just in the North Pacific Gyre. This is a global concern. We have found plastics in all 5 gyres.
A little bit frightening, but that's why we're all here and young and fresh and out to go and change the world, isn't that right? Okay. Some more images there to shock and awe. You've probably all seen lots of these before. There's a good one down the bottom there showing a plastic bottle that's on the bottom of a coral reef there. So once again, the PET that's used in beverage containers generally sinks. So you see a lot of those when you're diving, and plastic cutlery. Possibly either an earbud, the remainder of an earbud, or a lollipop stick, probably in the sea turtle there. And whales getting caught up in drift nets. Another PET one there. I guess we can watch this. This is just when I came back, the Channel 7 News got on board, and I think this is it's exciting because I've even been meeting with people who've been in this kind of plastics game for quite some time now. They really feel like it's an exciting opportunity now. I mean, Adam mentioned the plastic bag bans being adopted now, South Australia, Northern Territory, ACT soon to jump on board, and I think we're at a really ripe time where we've got an opportunity to stand up and say that this plastic issue is out of hand. So to be getting media attention and to getting opportunities to go and talk to people around the country is great, I think, and this is the story that Channel 7 put together. Probably a little bit cheesy. But
a major environmental scandal's been uncovered, and it's right in our backyard. It's a vast island of rubbish that's slowly clogging the Pacific Ocean and killing wildlife.
They aren't tiny shells being washed ashore, it's plastic and it's everywhere. On the hidden beaches of Hawaii, it replaces sand.
There's this notion that when we use an item, we throw it away, and it goes to this magical, mystical place called Away. Well, I visited Away, and it was in the middle of the ocean.
The Pacific Ocean, and it's called the North Pacific Gyre, or the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, a so-called island of rubbish twice the size of France. Environmentalist Tim Silverwood spent 3 weeks there. His team trawled just below the surface to find trash, not treasure.
When you start doing the math in your mind that you're only taking a very, very thin sample of the ocean surface, it is heartbreaking and it's horrific.
He returned with a bounty.
This clearly does not belong in the ocean.
And photographs of beaches covered in plastic, washed up debris that's been swirling in the ocean for decades.
The Great Pacific Garbage Patch seems a world away from our pristine beaches, but it's our throwaway lifestyle that's responsible for its existence. Humans are the only ones that make waste that nature can't digest.
Plastics don't break down in the ocean, they just break up, imitating food for marine life. And right on our doorstep at Lord Howe Island, the flesh-footed shearwater is in decline. In the stomach of one bird, 276 pieces of plastic were found.
As far as I know, a world record. So that's equivalent to you or I having somewhere between 10 and about 12 kilos of plastic inside of your body.
Research like that makes the 45-year-old Keep Australia Beautiful campaign more relevant than ever.
You can't but help be moved by the vision that we've seen today, by seeing what we're actually doing to our planet, to our animals. It is just incredible, and I think we all do need to be woken up, I guess.
Rebecca Madden, 7 News.
So, a fair bit of stuff that we kind of repeated through there. I apologise for that, but I guess when it comes down to me and why I'm so motivated to keep going and talking about this issue and trying to instigate real change is that simple statement. I mean, like, is this really what we can expect a beach in the future to look like? Forget about everything else and everything that. I mean, just for aesthetic reasons, is this what we really want to be handing over to our future generations? So I think we are in a time now where we can still make real changes and we can still make a difference, but we can't leave it for too much longer. I mean, we've produced and used more plastic in the last 10 years than we have in the entire history of plastic before that. So it's over 120 years before that. So we're using it. We've got countries around the world that are starting to adopt it more widely, which haven't previously been using it. So something needs to happen now, and it's really important that we do that. Now, I think that might be the end of the slide, so I might throw it over to you guys for some questioning or some comments or some sort of share some sentiment on if you've learnt anything today or anything you think that's a critical issue that I haven't included. Like I said, I'm just a citizen scientist doing my little bit. So, who's got a question for me? Someone else have a question for me. Yes?
It might seem really obvious, but all the plastic that's inside these animals that you're showing, is that what's killed them, or are they...
With the albatross, they can very clearly say that it's led to starvation and dehydration. A lot of the seabirds actually get their fluids from the fish that they fish and food that they get. So dehydration and starvation definitely. What's it like with sea turtles? I mean, is it pretty easy to draw parallels? I know that people say, like Seabird Rescue said, I mean, there's no denying that these 370 pieces didn't attribute to its death, but is it easy?
A lot of it is the hard plastics that break up, have really jagged edges, and it will just cut their intestines. And it will also just block their guts completely so that they can't digest anything. So yeah, usually it's just starvation from blockage.
Yeah, so certain animals, I mean, if you think about, a whale kind of swimming through this thing and swarming up, and they're probably, every mouthful they're probably getting huge amounts of plastic, but they're probably going to be able to pass that throughout because it's very small in relation to its digestive tract. But the smaller the creature, the smaller it's going to be to pass that on, and that's when you get those blockages and when you get those concerns about tearing up the organs and whatnot. Yes?
It seems like with a lot of environmental issues, you've got a lot of researchers and stuff out there trying to get hard evidence to affect policy change. But has anyone ever asked the companies who are producing these plastics to provide evidence that they're not causing these problems?
It's a really good point. That's the thing. I mean, if we could actually kind of set some sort of precedent to actually allow that to happen, it could be incredible. But I mean, they've got such strong powers. I'm kind of noticing at the moment. I'm being a little bit outspoken on the issues surrounding the cash for containers, which is the recycling scheme where you get a container deposit legislation it's called. So South Australia's had it since 1975, and the Northern Territory government voted and approved to adopt it for 2012, and now Coca-Cola has come out and is taking them to court. They're basically challenging the Northern Territory government, saying it's unlawful for them to do it. So it just goes to show how much power, and I've got some colleagues over in the States who've had incredible
heavy-handed tactics coming at them for trying to introduce plastic bag bans. Like one guy, Andy Keller, who's the founder of Chico Bag, they make reusable bags. He's doing quite well out of himself. He's made these reusable alternatives, and 3 of the big plastic bag manufacturers sued him in a random US state down in South Carolina. He's based in California because it was one of these few states that had this anti-slap legislation, so they were allowed to basically go against freedom of speech and say you can't tell people that plastic bags are bad. It's immense what they're doing, lobbying, like millions of dollars lobbying to try and stop this. I mean, they're protecting their interests. And what's clear is that they've got away with so much for so long. They keep on thinking they can just keep on bringing those heavy-handed tactics to play because they've worked in the past. I mean, who knows where it's going to lead for me? I'll probably end up getting, something will go wrong and they'll challenge me. I don't know, but while you've got the opportunity to do it, I'm going to try. It's a good question. Yeah, man.
Tim, when you're doing the trials, what was the sort of proportion of plastic to organic?
We used to use, in the early stages when they first did research into these the plastics out there, they used to rely on that figure. There was the best one they ever got was kind of like 42 times more plastic than plankton. But the guys at Algalita and Five Gyres have kind of pulled back on using that as a comparison because it is so variable. Obviously, if you trawl at night, you trawl at daytime, there could be a bloom here, something going on. So they've really kind of pulled back on it. This, for example, this came from one of the high-speed trawls when we were pretty much outside the garbage patch region there because most of the samples had to go off to universities. And you'll see it's probably, 95% organic matter. And that's from one of the high-speed ones, which was in the ocean for quite some time. So, yeah, it's not really the greatest tool, I guess, for kind of really showing hard evidence on that. I think it's more about, I don't know what it's going to take to really kind of, I think that just the metaphor of this garbage patch as being this plastic soup, which is obviously impossible to clean up. It's impossible to clean up. It's right throughout the water column. There's so much organic matter within it. You can't just go and scoop it up. You take everything that is the basis of our food chain, is giving us the oxygen that we breathe. You just can't do it. Beach cleanups are fantastic because you can actually get out there and physically take these items away and say, you're not going to get back into the ocean. So I don't know how we convince people that this is so serious and this is what we need to do. Images that we've had of animals in distress, people get detached from that. I mean, we get empowered by it and we get moved because we feel it when we care about those kind of things. But some people are just like, turtle? Like, I don't have a pet turtle, I've got a pet dog. If that was in trouble, I'd care. But yeah, people are hard to be moved. And that's why I think this evidence about the toxicology of us ingesting chemicals that could be carcinogenic, that are endocrine disruptors, all these horrific chemicals they use in the manufacture of plastic and in a whole range of other hydrocarbons, when we get to see that evidence coming out that our test tube generation, our kids are going to have ADHD and diabetes and cancer because of it, then maybe we can get some change happening with that.
I guess councils we're particularly looking at taking the point of view that trying to communicate with school children at an early age about the values of the environment is a way to instill in them the notion that as they get towards adults, we can get generational change, and rather than focusing on just getting better cleanups, more resources into removing it, try and change the behaviour. And all of the focus with a lot of the non-government organisations in councils and councils is to try and put that in school systems.
Good on you. It's so critical.
We do have that now. I know whenever I go to do a school talk about something, I often ask them, what eats plastic bags? And you never have an occasion where the students don't know. They just go, turtles.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And maybe 8 years ago, they wouldn't know that, but they do know that now.
Yeah. Unreal. On that note, 2012, we're working with Taronga Zoo. I don't know what kind of resources you've got, but Take 3 is developing an education, like a downloadable resource about marine debris that can kind of go into all schools around Australia. And with that, some kind of plans of action to go and do things like, package-free lunch days and looking at a plastic reduction initiative in schools. So just kind of getting them on the train early. It's so true, and I really think that's great that you guys are investing energy in that.
They're going home and they're telling their parents.
Yeah, that's the big one.
So is there no way to even if we stop now, obviously we still have all the existing plastic out there. Is there no way to clean that up? Or
there's some kind of companies that are doing projects, I think more based around the positive PR as opposed to actually making a real difference to the plastic that's already out there. Electrolux is going and making a boutique range of vacuum cleaners from debris all around the world, and all with the message to say that they've got a really good message though to say that, well, we want easier access to recycled materials to make our products, because recycling is so flawed at the moment in many, many ways. I mean, things aren't being made that are highly recyclable. Things aren't being made out of, nothing's closed loop. It always takes new, fresh virgin plastics or something else to kind of come into it. This is more in the plastic sense. Cardboard and glass are probably a little bit more efficient. But, the idea of recycling is that you start with an item and then you put it in a, you give it off to that man and he goes and does something, whatever he does with it, and it comes back and it's that item again. But it doesn't happen, plastic bags, for example, the lobbyists will try and say, oh, we can just recycle plastic bags, it's fine, but you can't. If you can use maybe 30% recycled content max in a plastic bag because the polymer chains are so weak and so broken down, so you still need 70% virgin plastic to do it. So, it's not feasible. It needs to get a whole overhaul, I reckon. Could be a lot better.
What do you think of there's a guy, I think it's in Australia, who's selling bottled water to raise money to remove plastics, or just supply water to somewhere else?
Madness. Yeah. It does seem like a bloody contradiction. I know. This is the thing. I mean, bottled water really annoys me. We've got obviously a huge need for bottled water, and there's situations when it's incredibly valuable. And I know travelling around parts of the world too, where I have to rely on bottled water a lot. But in our country, where we're gifted with the most amazing drinking water, and we still go and pay money for it, it's.
I think Coca-Cola owns Never Fail, which is bottled water in those
large
canisters. Yet you can get the same water cooler with a container that's filter and just put tap water into it. So you've got cool water that's come out of the tap.
We've got amazing tap water. That's what annoys me. I mean, we're lucky. We're so lucky.
That comes from them.
Billion-dollar industry. And I mean, have you guys looked into that at all? Because I know that there's probably about 10 universities now in Australia that have banned bottled water on campus. And look into.
People don't realise bottled water is more expensive than tap.
Exactly.
It's quite interesting though, the bottled water, it's not even always as good quality as the tap water too. I used to work down in Burdekin, we did water quality testing. We had these little nitrate strips which would test how much nitrate's in the water. We got a few different brands of bottled water, and that was just below pink, which means it's really high nitrate. and that was coming out of bottled water. So where they get it from is not always good source.
Yeah, exactly. And you go and get this exotic stuff from Fiji shipped over here because that's exotic. It's this has got a huge carbon footprint. It's still water. I think it's one of the most brilliant marketing campaigns in the world. This kind of illusion of health and well-being and beauty which comes from drinking a little bit of water out of a little plastic bottle that took all this oil to produce. You'll see in Bagot they make a bit of a damning kind of look at the insanity around bottled water. So come along and check that one out.
Yeah. Recently we changed added as a separate date for North Queensland for the Clean Up Australia Day. It was nationally in March, but it's recognised that in North Queensland the wet season just happened before March, and all of the plastics get washed out to sea. So doing a clean up after the wet season is kind of pointless. So we do it in September now.
Great.
It's called the Great Northern Cleanup, and it was difficult to get that on board with them because it seems to be in conflict with the national day. And it's still hard because people want council to support them for Clean Up Australia Day in March. So saying, well, we want to support you to clean up in September. Don't do the March one. Get the rubbish before it gets washed out.
Yeah.
There's more there. So we're doing cleanups in March, and people are feeling great about it, but they're picking up 10% of what they could have picked up if they did it in September.
Yeah, that's great. Oh, you can always just go and clean up every day. Take 3. Yes, please. Yeah.
With regards to the take 3 and disposing of rubbish, is there an issue with the fact that obviously you're removing the rubbish from the environment, but it's going essentially back to landfill that will never degrade and will eventually end up back perhaps in the place where you first picked it up? What's your opinion, or other initiatives on, say, incinerating rubbish instead of going to landfill? And is that a general policy that you encourage in Australia?
I don't feel that good about incineration, not when you're in a country like Australia. I I'm not highly educated on it. I mean, I know, like, in Hawaii, I was quite shocked to find how much they incinerate there, but they do use it to generate electricity, and I'm sure they've got some very advanced kind of technology to do it in the most clean possible way, but I don't like the idea of all the toxins being released. But I know that there is a lot of stuff going on. I think the US Navy has developed some remarkable technology with these closed incinerators that they use on board the vessels to generate fuel and all these kinds of things there. So I think technology, there's room there, but interestingly, yeah, thinking about your point there about the fact that you just put it in landfill and, you know, what does that mean? It doesn't go away still. It's still going to be entombed forevermore, but I wouldn't be surprised if in a couple of 100 years' time people are digging up landfill to go and use those petroleum-based plastics to generate new fuels. I mean, there's a Japanese scientist, I think there's one over in the States now as well, who already does that. They can actually generate petroleum from plastics. They can reverse the cycle back into it to generate fuel. So I think that's going to be I think we're going to be looked back upon as being rather stupid for just using and abusing plastic. This little short window we had to petroleum, we did all these amazing things, but then we just fucked it all up. Excuse my French. Any more questions? Yeah?
I know that a company that is producing biodegradable plastic in the industrial level. I don't know if you know if there's advance in spreading this kind of plastic.
Yeah, there is. It's a mixed feelings, because obviously it's amazing that they can actually make it so that it can be biodegradable. To do it on a wide scale, there's implications in terms of the amount of agricultural land and the food stocks potentially to actually make the plant-based plastic materials. Most of the biodegradable plastics that are out there now come from plant-based sources. There is people who are looking at doing it out using the proteins from feathers and all sorts of other things and organic items. But so there's issues around that. Like if we did adopt it widely, how much more agricultural territory would we need to get the amount of food stocks for it? There's also the issue, well, that's all well and good to use biodegradable, but you still need to have a pretty specific system in place to make sure it is actually in a biodegradable system. So you need industrial composting, for example, to actually put plant-based plastics into. One of the best examples of that is San Francisco, who they actually have great policy surrounding the recycling of goods there and composting. It's the law to compost. So you can actually put your plant-based plastics into the composting facilities, and it goes off to an industrial complex where moisture and heat all go into it, and it actually does break it down. But in Australia, I think they're in very, very short supply, especially in regional areas. It's just going to go off to landfill, get into the environment where, yes, it will break down. I'm sure if it got into an animal, it would break down a hell of a lot faster than plastic would. But, I think before we go and embrace it widely, we need to do a lot of hard thinking about it. Yeah. Yes?
I just wondered if you reusable enviro bags are made from, because they're obviously more substantial than plastic bags. So kind of only use it lots of times, and then they do eventually fall apart. So I just was concerned that they might be made from plastic as well, and actually getting them.
Yeah.
Is that helpful? Perhaps we should have problems.
Yeah, I can pretty much guarantee that if your reusable bag doesn't declare that it's hemp or hessian or organic cotton or something like that, then it's probably plastic based. So same way, I mean, there's some that use recycled content, like Chico Bag, the one I was referring to before. They have a range which use 99.9% recycled content. But I mean, coming down to it, I mean, that's okay. I mean, plastic is not about demonising plastic and not using it. It's about eliminating the single-use disposable items. This notion that we can just use it and throw it away. I mean, how ridiculous. I mean, our parents and our grandparents didn't have that. We didn't have plastic. We didn't have single-use plastics until the post-war boom. So how did it get so bad? Why can we not go and take our own coffee cup and get our coffees? You know, why can't we use reusable bottles? Why can't we use reusable bags? You know, reusable cutlery? I mean, there's other ways around it. And that's what I'm really about advocating, I think, is just eliminating this notion that we can just use and abuse disposable plastics. It's absolutely madness. It doesn't seem it because we've all grown up with it, but it really is madness. And there was a great graphic I posted up on Facebook yesterday. It was a picture of a spoon, and it was, how did it come to this? And it's like, 70 million years to get this oil. We extracted it, we refined it, we made it in this resource, and we made a spoon. and we threw it away. It's like, we're so remarkable because we can do it, but we're pretty stupid that we just throw it away. It's really crazy. That it? Cool. Well, that's been fun, guys. Really appreciate you guys listening and asking such great questions. Feel free to come on down and check out some of the items. You should wash your hands if you are sampling this stuff because of that issue with the persistent organic pollutants. We don't want you guys getting disease-ridden because of me. And I've got a mailing list over there. Find me on Facebook, Tim Silverwood, Take 3, all that jazz. And thanks again for having me.
All right. Could everyone please put their hands together?